This is Sheila with SheVersion, and today I am producing my first episode where I'm going to introduce myself. I am a stay-at-home mom and wife, and I have 3 kids, and we homeschool. My kids are all a bit older now. They're in their teens, which is sad. I never dreamed on becoming a wife or a mother. I actually had no intention of doing that. My goal in life was to become a geologist, and I was going to travel the world by myself. I had no desire to have people around me, and I wanted to be alone, honestly. I know it sounds crazy, but I did. I wanted to be alone. And everything changed. My entire life changed. And so now I'm married and have 3 kids, and I stay at home and homeschool. So I grew up in the country. I worked the farms, and I babysat. My grandpa had a farm, and I helped out there, and I also babysat people's kids and stuff while they were doing work. And so I ended up spending a lot of time outdoors. I also love to read. I'm a big bookworm. I loved school. I just hated public school. I loved learning. I loved being in the library. It was quiet and there was books everywhere. The smell was wonderful. People left me alone. It was nice. So anyway, my favorite thing to do was actually find one of my books after I got done with my chores and get up in a tree and not answer when they called for me. I actually really enjoyed that quite a bit. But because of this, and I love science, I realized whenever I was young that there had to be a creator. I was a Christian. I grew up a Christian, but there was a lot about church that I struggled with. There was a lot of questions that I had. And so by the time I got into college, I was starting to wonder, was Christianity it? I knew that there was a God, but was it the Christian God or was it a different one? And so I started asking a lot of questions. But between my science classes and nature, it just was very evident to me that there had to be a creator. While I was in college, I met my husband. We were just friends at first, obviously. And he ended up becoming a Christian himself, and I had some big questions, and one day he asked me what was troubling me, and he was very persistent, and I ended up telling him what was troubling me. And that started this long conversation where he started helping me find the answers to all my questions. After several months, it was probably about 6 months, he proved invaluable. And he was about ready to graduate college, and I knew that he was going to be moving away one day and end up getting married. And his wife would not want me calling and asking him questions. So my mind changed to where I realized I couldn't live without him because I had a million more questions, and he was the only one that I had found that could actually do the deep research and find the answers for me. So when he asked me out finally, I said yes, and then it wasn't long after that he asked me to marry him. And so we got married, and we hadn't intended to have kids, but then after a few years I was like, I want to have his kids. So we ended up having kids. Once the kids got old enough to go to school, when I started having kids, I became Mama Bear, and nobody was allowed to touch them. They were mine. I was pretty protective of them. And I remembered school and how much I hated being in public school. And I was like, I don't want this to be my kids' future. So the first year for my first kid, I homeschooled. But I was terrible at it. I didn't do a good job, and my husband was like, you know what, I didn't marry you to be a homeschool mom. Maybe this is not you, and it's okay. You can be a career mom. Those, exist, so let's do that. So I did. We put him into school for a few months, and I realized, nope, still too protective of my kids, and it did not go well. So we tried again. and I discovered that there was many ways of homeschooling that doesn't include sitting in front of a chalkboard with your kids 8 hours a day. So I found my avenue of how to homeschool my kids, and I'm so glad. So glad. It's been hard. There's been a lot of learning, but it's been great. So Brandon and I, we never stopped looking into our belief systems. We became very meticulous, and we rattled our foundations in every cage that we came upon. We weren't just satisfied with the status quo answers, just have faith, just believe. It needed to be more than that. It needed to be substantial. He's an electrical engineer, and I was a geologist, or a geology degree. And so we were nitpicky about everything. And we discovered through our time together and all of our questioning and looking into things that Christianity is true. It's reliable, it's amazing, it's logical. And so we started looking into, we looked into other religions and realized that they weren't logical and consistent. They had a lot of huge holes in them that were not hard to find. And so we realized Christianity was true and the Bible was reliable, which was fantastic. And it was hard, but it was a lot of fun, actually. I think back, we had a lot of fun looking and digging into all these things. So we were rattling all of our cages and checking out, okay, so Christianity is true, but what church should we be a part of? The Catholic Church, Lutheran, Baptist, Pentecostal, non-denominational? Maybe none of the churches have it right. Maybe we were willing for any of those options to be the case. I have to admit, it was really demoralizing. There was not very many pastors who enjoyed our questions or welcomed us back. So it was really sad, actually. I was really surprised by the discouragement that we got asking these questions and digging in. Not just from the pastors and the congregations, but also from family members who were just appalled that we would question such things. But we're pretty determined, and we did it anyway. And then one day, I got asked a question. We ended up going to a church that we liked. We really liked them and liked the people and stuff. I mean, we weren't completely settled. We were still questioning, but we realized we needed to be in a church someplace and to have community. And so we chose this one based on some friends, telling us about the people that they knew there and how great it was and the pastor and all that. And I had some girlfriends, and I ended up in 1 week having 3 people ask me virtually the same question. They didn't really know each other, like they didn't communicate with each other much. And so it really surprised me, and it annoyed me, because it ended up being that I had to look into Arminianism versus Calvinism. And that was one of the areas that I didn't want to get into. I felt it was divisive and it was pointless, and I really just was like, why? Why would I ask this question when I don't care? That's theology, man-made belief system about the Bible, when I could just go to the Bible and I'll stay there in the Bible and not get into man-made arguments. But I took that 3 times within a few days as a sign that I needed to look into it. And so I was like, Brandon, I need your help. We need to start looking into this. And he's like, but I don't want to. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to either. So, but we're going to do it anyway. And so he looked into it, and I wasn't happy about the results. He became a Calvinist, and I was not. And I was not okay with the direction he was going. So we fought about it for a few months. And then one day, all of my questions, all of my arguments against it were completely demolished, It was logical. It was consistent. It held to biblical standards. And I was like, ah, no. And so I fought with God for about 3 months. I wasn't happy. I was completely unhappy with the results of our research. But it changed my life. And my relationship with God just blossomed. It just went from being me struggling to get to know who God was and wanting so much to get to know him more, to all of a sudden, it was like I met him face to face. And I was like, yes, you're the God in the Bible that I was reading about. And it changed my life completely. So, yes, I have annoyed quite a few people in my family and friends over this. But it's worth it. Yes, I was stage caged for a while. I was definitely rattling everybody else's cages, and was making all the wrong mistakes for a bit. But God is merciful and gracious, and I apologize to those I needed to apologize to. So that is probably the first 13 years of Brandon and I's marriage. And then 2020 happened. It tried to kill us. In November, we were in a car accident. We were on the interstate. It was our entire family, and we were doing a little mini vacation with our family to see my father-in-law, and had our dogs with us. The trunk was packed, like completely full, and the 3 kids were in the back seat, and we were on our way. I had fallen asleep that morning, and had my head left resting against the door jamb on a pillow, and we slowed down for construction on the road. We were going about 24 miles an hour, and the guy behind us hit us going 75. I heard later that it was really bad, and that I needed to hug my kids, because the fact that they were alive was a miracle. As time has gone on, I realized I probably should have buried my husband and one of my sons, definitely, and maybe had a vegetable for another kid. But God is so gracious. We didn't even get a broken bone. There wasn't any cuts. No one needed stitches. We thought that one of my sons had a broken arm, and he got hit in the face by the seat and got pinned across the chest, and the back seat came forward, and we were all definitely battered. Everyone had headaches. Everyone felt sore. But the hospital released us after 4 or 5 hours of being in there and getting tests done. We were pretty dazed and confused. It was a really bad day. Because I was asleep, ended up hitting my head multiple times. When I came to, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know who my husband was, and I didn't know my children. This is really very hard to tell, because I'm a mama bear, and I want to be there for my kids no matter what. I want to be in control of the situation and save them. I want them to be able to rely upon me. But that day, in the middle of our catastrophe, I didn't even know who they were. It took hours before I realized I knew my husband. I knew that I knew him. I knew I could trust him, like after probably about an hour, but I wasn't sure who he was. He told me his name was Brandon. Told me the kids' names. I knew I could trust him, and I was just attached to him. I was like, I gotta stay with him, because I'll be okay if I'm with him. I knew that the kids were his kids, and to get me into the ambulance, he told me that I needed to go to the hospital with the kids, so that way, because they were going to be scared, and he had to stay with the dogs until the Humane Society came. So I was like, okay, I'm going to help him out, and I'm going to help take care of his kids. And so I went to the hospital with the kids in the ambulance to try to help take care of them, but they took care of me. I actually, right after the accident, when I came to, I couldn't even understand language. Like, people were talking, but it was all gobbledygook. I mean, it could have been Charlie Brown's, you know, the parents talking to Charlie Brown. I couldn't understand them, and it took probably about 5 or 10, maybe 20 minutes. I don't know. I ended up with traumatic brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury, and so I have memory issues. Since the accident, I actually have really hard time retaining any information. When I go to bed and wake up, it's almost like 51st dates. It's not that bad. At first it was. At first I couldn't figure out why when I woke up in the morning I was in so much pain and dizzy and nauseous. I was like, why is the room spinning? Someone messing with my bed, you know, it was just, it messed me up, and it would take a while to go methodically through all my memories up to the point of the accident to be able to remember that I had been in an accident. So, everything that I learned, actually after the accident I couldn't even read. I couldn't use my eyes. Anytime I moved my eyes I was so dizzy and nauseous I thought I was going to puke right then and there. It took a long time to recover enough to actually even be able to look around the room just using my eyes. I laid in bed for months. I don't know how long I laid in bed. Barely ever got out of my house for a full year. But it was 2020, you know, and then 2021, so nobody was getting out. It was weird. I can remember things before the accident better than I can remember things after. It's still hard to go back and get that information. Sometimes it's painful to try to remember things. It takes me, you know, much longer to function than I used to. The doctors told me that I essentially got shaken baby syndrome, and that everything was just too overwhelming for me. And like a baby, I have to slowly be desensitized to the world around me. It really took a long time, and it was demoralizing. They had to help me, my stability was off. They had to help me from the bed to the bathroom for a long time, when my husband did. And then to walk from one part of the house to the next. Even now, my balance is better, but it's not as good as it should be. And they still help me walk, because once I get exhausted or overwhelmed, I teeter around and walk into walls. So that's fun. The kids, they recovered pretty well. My husband and I have been dealing with migraines for 3 years now. So it's changed our entire life. Now the doctors are telling me that they think that I have Alice in Wonderland syndrome. It's a thing. I didn't think it was a thing. We looked it up, and it's a thing. It's ridiculous. Memory issues. So everything I do, I have to have notes. Otherwise, I'm going to forget it all. So that's fun. So, to be able to get out of the house and go places. I am an extrovert, so I have to modify things to be able to get out and go places and do things. These are filters. They're from TheraSpecs. They filter out something that causes migraines. They're amazing. I love them. I live with them. I've gotten to the point now where I can live without them for about maybe up to an hour a day before I start getting a migraine, but otherwise I can get out and go and do stuff. Noises are too much for me, so my husband got me these Sony earbuds. They do noise canceling. Fantastic. Oh my goodness. I can do so many different things. And he also got me this. It's a portable stool that I can open up like a pop-up tent, and I have myself a little stool, because people don't like it when I sit on the floor. I used to sit on the floor all the time. They would ask me why I was sitting on the floor and I was going to get dirty when I was younger. Now they freak out and wonder if I'm dying and if I need help. So we have a stool so that way nobody gets upset about me sitting on the floor. I'm a little bitter about that because I do like sitting on the floor. I know it's weird, but it's my thing. I'm a very determined person, so I don't just accept my limitations very well. I make everyone's life harder, not on purpose, but because I want to do it myself. So I'm learning to accept my limitations a little better because I don't want to make my family suffer because I'm trying to do it by myself. So I really get annoyed when people come up to me and try to encourage me. I know it's coming from a good place in their heart where they're trying to encourage me to keep going, to keep praying that I can get full recovery from this. I hope and pray that I do, and I pray very fervently for that. Oh, it would just be wonderful to be the old Sheila. But I've had to be able to move on in my life and be able to deal with the new normal for now. Perhaps in the future I do get healed and I don't have these problems anymore. But the thing is, I'm not going to put all my chickens in that basket. I have to live my life. And I've gotten kind of bitter about the name it, claim it prosperity gospel. It is completely obnoxious to have people come up to me and tell me that I need to just name it and claim it, and that if I believe it well enough that I'm going to be better, that God can heal me and that He will heal me if I just believe it and I speak it into existence. I am not God. I don't get the opportunity to speak things into existence. If I did have that ability, I promise you a lot of things would be very different. Only God has the ability to speak things into existence. That's what we saw at creation. He created the world from His very words, and that's amazing. And we are created in His image. And I'm not saying that we should just be dumb and just say, oh my goodness, I'm just so broken, and then just believe it and just go with that. No, we need to be hopeful, and we need to, what we're saying gets into our souls and we believe it. You know, if you say it often enough, you will believe these things. It's not that you're creating it to happen by the words that you say. It's that you can produce a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know, by believing it so much that you live it. I don't speak negatively about this. I'm not trying to be depressed about it or anything else like that. But there are days where it is depressing. It's not fun. And you want to know what? That's the real world. Life is not easy, and it's not always fun. But God is faithful, and He has been seeing me through this whole thing. I trust Him implicitly, and one day I believe that I will be healed. But it's not because I'm going to speak it into existence. It's because it's going to be a gift from God that He decided and that He gifts me. But do you know that God doesn't always answer our prayers the way we want Him to? One example is Paul. Paul had something called a thorn in his side. There's different theories as to what that was, but it was something that bothered him. And he prayed fervently for God to remove this thorn. But the answer he got was, my grace is sufficient for you. That was not the answer I'm sure he was wanting. He was wanting to be healed because he firmly believed that God could heal. Because he had been raised from the dead. Who knows how many times? What, 3 times? That man had gone through so much. If somebody was going to have enough faith and belief to be able to be healed miraculously, it probably would have been Paul, of all the people, because of how many times he had gone through hell and back again, and God saw him through. Another person that prayed was Jesus. When he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed that God would take the cup from him. In his flesh, he didn't feel like going to the cross to be murdered. he wasn't overly excited at the idea of going through that torture. So the fact that he prayed for that cup to be taken from him, and then he still went to the cross, is marvelous. For one, I'm so grateful that he did, and he didn't allow his flesh, the desire to not go through that, to stop him. Sorry about that, my dogs were barking. So back to what I was saying. Jesus didn't feel like going to the cross. In his flesh, he didn't desire to be tortured. But for a greater plan that he had designed with the Father from creation, he went ahead and he purchased our freedom and took the punishment of our sins on himself for a glorious plan. So he died, was in the grave for 3 days, but he didn't stay there. Like a boss, he came up out of the grave, and now he's the King of Kings. Anyway, I find that really exciting. One of the things about the prosperity gospel is that if you could just name it and claim it like that, there's a lot of questions that I have about, well, then why did God just forget about the disciples? I mean, they all went through awful, awful deaths. John starved to death, but the rest of them were like crucified and boiled and all these gruesome deaths. Did God just forget about them? I mean, they were his apostles. So, I mean, we're supposed to be better off. You know, we can have this great prosperity life, or prosperous life, that we can just have whatever we want to. But they had to go through that suffering, and we're able to escape that. Well, what about the Christians around the world who are being martyred for their faith to this day? Are they also just not favored by God enough? You know, their prayers aren't as good. They don't have as good enough faith. The prosperity gospel puts so much pressure on the person who is going through so much and so much suffering. It makes it to where what you're saying is the reason why I'm not healed is because I don't have enough faith. My prayers aren't good enough. I've done something to deserve it. Can we just go back to Job? I mean, Job was the righteous man on the face of the earth, and his faith was tested by God. And it wasn't because he had done anything wrong that he ended up going through this suffering. But he got to get closer to God through that suffering. He was the intermediary for his friends who were telling him, it's your fault. You're in this situation because you've done something. His friends had offended God by the stuff that they were saying. And Job prayed for them so that way they didn't get punished for the things that they were saying. There's a lot to the prosperity gospel that needs to be challenged. You need to look into what you believe and why you believe it. Theology matters. Theology is critical. It's not just man-made beliefs. It is what the Bible is saying that we are seeing and concisely putting into a belief system. It's not just men saying this and that. It is it needs to be a consistent, thorough understanding of the Word of God that is logical and consistent. So, sorry, we're still dealing with TV out here. Okay, so here I am. I woke up after, as time went on, I started being able to remember my kids better in their childhood. There's still major holes. It's not completely better yet, but it's better than it was. And I started to become more aware of the world around me and what was going on. And I have to tell you, it's been really surreal and frustrating. What in the world? I thought we knew better. Like, why are we doing some of the stuff that we're doing? It's very frustrating. So incredibly frustrating. It doesn't make any sense to me why we're doing some of the things that we're doing in our world. Like, how did we get to this point? What? Sorry, I'm gonna go off on a tangent on that one. Everyone is seeing that our country is in trouble. And I've been hearing it a lot. Jesus is coming. It's just coming around the corner. You know, it's going to be any day now. Jesus is coming. And I don't necessarily disagree. I'm not saying that I think that he's not coming. I do believe that he is coming. I know that he's coming. He could come in the next year. But my money is that it's going to be thousands of years from now. I'm sure that shocks a lot of people. Because they're like, what? Can't you see what's going on? I mean, the world is on fire. I agree. The world is on fire. But this is not the first time. This is just the first time we've had so much media covering it. It is global now in a way that it was never global beforehand. But this is not the first time an entire society has descended into chaos and broken down. And it won't be the last. It's going to happen over and over again because people are sinful. We will get into this more. We will definitely deal with this more, but there's some major groundwork that needs to be laid first. This is not something that I'm going to put into just one little video because so right now we're learning that our schools are really indoctrination camps where they're teaching us what to think, not how to think, because it's easier to control people whenever they only have access to a certain amount of information. But if we were really teaching history, there would be a lot more people who would be like, oh, you know what? Some of this stuff is just like when the Roman Empire went down or the Byzantine Empire. Oh, what about that Turkish? Anyways, if we had more history under our belt, there would be a lot less people thinking this is the end. It's the end of maybe America. I hope and pray that it's not. But, I mean, we've done enough to deserve judgment. And so we need to be on our faces praying that God would forgive us and to save us from ourselves. But it's not just the schools that have become indoctrination camps. This is going to hurt a lot of people, but there is so many congregations out there who are indoctrination camps. They are not being taught how to read the Bible for themselves. They're being taught what to think, not how to think. They're not being taught how to study and to show themselves approved. They are being told, have enough faith, shut up and sit down, stop asking so many questions. If your church is not teaching you how to study the Bible, not just read the Bible in what is really a book club and read certain verses that are proof text for certain theories and ideas, if you're just in a book club, you're not being prepared. You're not being equipped for the life that you're supposed to be leading. You need to be in a Bible study where you're taking an entire book of the Bible and studying it. If you're not being equipped in how to do that and how to study deeply and intently and making it a part of who you are, then there's a good chance you're not really in a church that is biblical, and you might need to reconsider where you're going because you need to be equipped to be able to handle these days. Otherwise, you're going to vacillate from between one idea to the next, constantly being insecure about your salvation or about whether or not God is really in control and whether or not he can handle the situation that you are in personally or we are in as a culture and a society. So there's a lot of people who have been talking about, I'm waiting for a revival. I can't wait for, they're praying intently for revival. I love that. Definitely pray for revival. But if you want revival, read your Bible. Okay? Just read the Bible. It in itself will revolutionize your life. It is worth your time and your effort. Read your Bible for revival. So this is my intro, and I am going to be stepping through how I know these things. I've made a lot of really large claims, I know, and there's going to be a lot of people who are probably upset with what I have to say and wondering whether or not I even know what I'm talking about. That's fine. I'm not intimidated by a challenge. You're not the first one to have the questions. I had those questions too. And so don't worry. All of these things that I possibly can, I will get through as quickly as I can. But just realize I'm dealing with traumatic brain injury, and so it will be at my pace. I hope and pray that you guys are challenged to look deeply into these things, because it will change your life. So stay tuned for next week.